Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. In this episode, Paolo Franceschetti takes us to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a mid-sized American city that most people would consider perfectly ordinary. He will show us why it is anything but. Milwaukee is the place where the American dream was born on television, where its darkest nightmare lived next door, where the most famous steel horse in the world was built, and where one of the most widely read spiritual books of our time had its origins. For phenomena, for archetypes, one city. Franceschetti calls it the city of the unconscious, and by the end of this episode, you will understand why. Paolo Franceschetti opens this episode of America's Esoteric History by presenting Milwaukee as a medium-sized American city of extraordinary symbolic density. With a population of approximately 580,000, Milwaukee is the fifth largest city in the Great Lakes region and is known primarily for its dairy industry, its brewing tradition, and, above all, for Harley-Davidson motorcycles. It sits on the western shore of Lake Michigan, positioned between Chicago to the south and Madison to the west. What makes Milwaukee remarkable, Franceschetti argues, is not its size or its industries, but its role as a container for some of the most powerful archetypes in the Western collective imagination. For phenomena, each deeply embedded in the global unconscious, converge in this city. Happy Days, the television prototype of the American dream. Harley-Davidson, the steel horse and symbol of individual freedom. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal and embodiment of the Black Rose Cross. And Neil Donald Walsch, the author of Conversations with God, who was born here and represents the White Rose Cross. The episode sets out to explain why all four of these phenomena emerged from the same geographical and energetic location. Milwaukee officially came into existence in 1846. But its name reaches back far earlier, to the Algonquian word Milochi, meaning gathering place by the water, or, in a second equally important meaning preserved by the native peoples of the region, place of council. The city takes its name from the water, specifically from Lake Michigan, into which three rivers converge at this point: the Milwaukee River, the Menominee River, and the Kinnickinnic River. This confluence of waters is not merely a geographical fact. For Franceschetti, it is a key to understanding the city's symbolic identity. From an alchemical and esoteric perspective, different bodies of water carry different symbolic meanings. The river is associated with movement, flow, and direction, water rushing toward something. The ocean represents immensity and the infinite. The lake, by contrast, is the symbol of stillness, of depth, of interiority. Water in alchemy is linked to feeling and to the unconscious, and a lake, particularly one as vast as Michigan, which on stormy days resembles an inland sea, is the supreme symbol of the unconscious, deep, potentially turbulent. but fundamentally contained and reflective. The native peoples who originally inhabited this territory, above all the Menominee, who occupied a vast natural area in what is now Wisconsin, chose their dwelling places, their meeting grounds, and even their battlefields with careful attention to the energies of the land. They did not settle or gather at random. Milwaukee was their traditional place of counsel precisely because its energies favored peace, serenity, and the resolution of conflict. When disputes arose between communities, the elders and wise men of the various groups would gather here, deliberate, and reach decisions by consensus. The land itself, in the native understanding, called forth harmony. It is this energetic foundation, Franceschetti argues, that makes Milwaukee the city of the unconscious, a place where the deepest contents of the American psyche, both luminous and dark, are drawn to the surface. The native peoples knew this and used it wisely. What happened when European settlers arrived and built their civilization on top of it is, as the episode will show, a far more complicated story. Milwaukee is, in many respects, the ideal embodiment of the American dream in its most tangible and livable form. It is large enough to offer genuine employment opportunities, a diverse economy, and the full range of urban services, yet small enough to avoid the chaos, the prohibitive costs, and the social fragmentation of cities like New York or Los Angeles. A family can afford a spacious home here. Workers can find decent wages. Children can realistically aspire to attend college. It is, in the popular imagination, the kind of city where the promise of American life still seems achievable. Yet Franceschetti is careful to place this dream within its historical and alchemical context. America, he argues, was conceived from its very origins as a Masonic and alchemical project, an attempt to build a new humanity, a land of freedom, a laboratory for an ideal society founded on liberty, meritocracy, and the fusion of peoples. The founding fathers were, almost without exception, Freemasons, and the Republic of the United States was designed according to principles that would later be explored in a dedicated episode of the series. The problem, and it is an enormous one, is that this dream was built upon a systematic and deliberate destruction. The Native American peoples who had lived on this land for thousands of years in deep harmony with nature were progressively dispossessed, confined to ever-shrinking reservations, and in many cases effectively exterminated. The natural world itself suffered a comparable fate. The vast herds of bison that once roamed the continent, and with which the native peoples lived in a relationship of respectful coexistence, were nearly wiped out. A dream built on such a foundation, Franceschetti observes, cannot endure without eventually confronting what lies beneath it. The unconscious does not forget. No cultural artifact captures the essence of the American dream more perfectly than Happy Days, the television series set in Milwaukee. Franceschetti describes it as the sacred text of the American dream, not an entertainment product, but an archetypal statement of what America believed itself to be, or at least what it wished to become. The series was not, notably, produced in the 1950s that it depicts, but in the 1970s, a decade of profound crisis marked by the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, the oil crisis, and deep racial tensions. Happy Days was not a nostalgic document. It was a corrective vision, a reminder to Americans of the values on which their civilization had been founded. At its center stands the Cunningham family, not simply a normal Milwaukee family, but an archetype of stability. The father runs a small business. The mother, Marion, is the guardian of the hearth, the embodiment of domestic security. The implicit promise of the Cunningham household is that if one follows the rules of the average family, one will be protected from the storms of the outside world. Security, home ownership, the automobile, the children's college education, these are the material rewards of a life lived according to the code. But the true heart of the series, for Franceschetti, is the figure of Fonzie. Fonzie is the urban, modern version of the frontier hero, a mechanic, self-made, risen from the bottom, yet the most respected man in the city. He embodies the core conviction of the American dream. That individual character, and personal merit count for more than social class or inherited wealth. His motorcycle is the symbol of individual freedom, of the capacity to move unencumbered through the world, to live according to one's own code. And yet, crucially, Fonzie always ends up defending the values of the community. His individualism is not destructive, it is protective. American individualism, the series argues, ultimately serves the common good. The series also presents an idealized vision of social integration. Richie Cunningham, the bourgeois boy, and Fonzie, the street kid, are best friends. Class barriers are overcome through friendship and shared experience. Arnold's Diner, where everyone gathers, is the temple of happy consumerism, a place where hamburgers, milkshakes, and music communicate a simple theological message. Material well-being is the just reward of a society that lives in peace. Every episode ends with conflict resolved. There is no problem that cannot be overcome through honest conversation, a little courage, and the intervention of a friend. This, Franceschetti observes, is the manifest destiny applied to everyday life, the unshakable conviction that the future will always be better than the past. There is, however, one detail in Happy Days that is rarely remarked upon, and that Franceschetti considers symbolically significant. Mr. Cunningham is a Freemason and is regularly shown attending a lodge called the Leopard Lodge. The reference is not emphasized, but it is consistent and deliberate. It is Freemasonry, the series quietly suggests, that underwrites this happy world, the same Masonic project that, in Franceschetti's reading, originally conceived America as its alchemical laboratory. The dream, however, excludes spirituality from its vision of happiness. It offers material comfort, social harmony, and individual freedom, but has no room for the inner life, for the sacred, for the deeper dimensions of human existence. This omission, Franceschetti argues, is not incidental. It is the crack through which the darkness eventually enters. Beneath the sunlit surface of the American dream, in the same city where the Cunninghams lived their televised idol, Jeffrey Dahmer committed 17 documented murders between 1978 and 1991. His method was to lure victims, predominantly young men, to his apartment with the promise of money and sex, then drug them, kill them, dismember them, and consume parts of their bodies. Some remains were stored in a freezer. Others were preserved in containers filled with a mixture of salts and acids to retard decomposition. Dahmer is described by Franceschetti not primarily as a criminal case, but as a symbolic phenomenon, the embodiment of the Black Rose Cross. What makes Dahmer's case particularly striking from an esoteric perspective is not the nature of his crimes alone, but their setting. He did not operate in an isolated house or a remote location. His apartment was on a central street, surrounded by neighbors who knew nothing. The horror was entirely contained within the ordinary, hidden beneath the surface of a quiet, unremarkable urban life. This, Franceschetti argues, is the precise symbolic image of the unconscious, the darkness that lies beneath the calm exterior, the terror that dwells within the familiar. The Rosicrucian symbolism surrounding Dahmer's life is, according to Franceschetti, remarkably dense. Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960. The following day, May 22nd, is the feast of Saint Rita of Cassia, the saint of the red rose, who according to tradition had a rose appear on her body at the moment of her death, and who is always depicted holding or surrounded by a rose. The 21st, the day before, is the feast of Saint Constantine, the day of the cross, commemorating the emperor who, according to tradition, saw the archangel Michael before the Battle of Milvian Bridge and placed the red cross on the shields and cloaks of his army. The 21st is therefore the day of the cross. The 22nd is the day of the rose. Together, the Rose Cross. Dahmer's death continues the symbolic pattern. He was killed in prison at the age reported as 33, the age of Christ, and a number of deep Rosicrucian significance, though Franceschetti notes that some sources suggest his actual age at death may have been 34, with 33 being a symbolic or mistaken attribution. His killer was Christopher Scarver, a name that carries within it the sign of Christ. Christopher means bearer of Christ. Scarver himself stated that he had acted because God had commanded him to do so. Dahmer's own words at trial are equally significant from an esoteric standpoint. He did not attempt to justify his actions by claiming pleasure or deliberate malice. Instead, he stated, "I do not know why I did this. I only know that a force was driving me." He asked for the maximum sentence and later, in prison, converted to Christianity. For mainstream criminologists and psychologists, such declarations are symptoms of a disturbed mind. For Franceschetti, they point to something else: the presence of dark entities, negative spiritual forces that drive certain individuals toward acts that serve their own purposes, in the same way that benevolent entities inspire and guide the great figures of the White Rose Cross. The most chilling episode in the Dahmer case, and the one that most clearly suggests to Franceschetti the presence of non-human intervention, concerns a boy named Conorak Synthesumphone. On May 27, 1991, Conorak managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment. He was 14 years old, naked, drugged, and in a state of severe confusion. He was found in the street by several women, one of whom, Glenda Cleveland, immediately called the police. 2 officers responded. When Dahmer arrived on the scene, he persuaded the officers that the situation was merely a lover's quarrel between 2 adults. The women protested vigorously. The boy was clearly a minor, clearly injured, clearly disoriented. The officers dismissed their concerns and, in a detail that defies ordinary explanation, personally escorted the boy back to Dahmer's apartment, waited while Dahmer thanked them warmly, and left. Dahmer then killed the boy and dismembered him. The officers were subsequently charged and then reinstated and acquitted. But beyond the question of human responsibility, Franceschetti notes a detail that makes the episode even more disturbing. Years earlier, Dahmer had already been convicted of sexual abuse against another member of Conorak's family, his older brother. The officers did not check Dahmer's criminal record. They did not question the boy's evident age. They dismissed the testimony of multiple witnesses. Something, Franceschetti suggests, intervened from above, or rather, from below. Where there is the Black Rose Cross, the White Rose Cross is always present. This is, for Franceschetti, one of the fundamental laws of the spiritual world. White and black appear in the same places, in approximately equal measure. Milwaukee produced Jeffrey Dahmer. It also produced Neil Donald Walsch, the author of Conversations with God, one of the most widely read and influential works of contemporary spiritual literature, which has sold millions of copies worldwide and continues to shape Western spirituality. Walsh's life story itself conforms to the archetype of the American dream in its most redemptive form. After a relatively normal life, he went through a painful divorce, lost his home, and found himself destitute and living on the street. In another country, this might have been the end of the story. In America, it was not. He was hired by a radio station despite his homeless condition, rebuilt a normal life, and then found that normal life profoundly unsatisfying. In a moment of existential crisis, he began writing a series of angry, despairing questions addressed to God. God, he reports, answered. The result was Conversations with God, a 3-volume work channeled, as Walsh describes it, from a source beyond his ordinary consciousness. The content, dealing with the purpose of life, reincarnation, the nature of the divine, and the metaphysical structure of existence, closely mirrors Rosicrucian teachings. Franceschetti notes that the connection between Walsh and the Rose Cross tradition is not immediately obvious from his biography in Milwaukee, but becomes entirely clear when one considers where he actually produced the work, in Ashland, Oregon. Ashland is a small town of approximately 21,000 inhabitants that would appear, at first glance, entirely unremarkable. Its defining characteristic, however, is the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, founded in 1935 and now one of the most important cultural events in the United States, the single most significant Shakespeare festival in the country. At its heart is the Allen Elizabethan Theatre, an open-air venue modeled on the design of the Elizabethan theatres of London. For anyone familiar with Rosicrucian history, the connection is immediate. Shakespeare, or rather, the works attributed to Shakespeare, is not the product of the man from Stratford, who by all available evidence was functionally illiterate. He signed his own will with a cross rather than a signature, and left no books among his possessions, had never traveled to Italy, and yet produced plays of extraordinary erudition set in Italian cities. The works attributed to Shakespeare were, in Franceschetti's reading, the product of the Rose Cross, a body of highly initiated individuals who used the Shakespeare Company as a vehicle for communicating Rosicrucian themes and ideas to a broad public. The transformation in the Shakespeare canon, the shift toward Italian settings and themes that characterizes the second half of the attributed works, is directly linked to the arrival in London of Giordano Bruno, the Italian philosopher and early forerunner of the Rose Cross. His followers were known as Giordanists. It was also after Bruno's influence that the Globe Theatre was constructed, on his indication, with a dense esoteric symbolism that reflects Rosicrucian principles. Ashland, with its annual Shakespeare Festival and its Elizabethan theatre, is therefore a markedly Rosicrucian city, and it is here, not in Milwaukee, that Walsh produced his masterwork. Franceschetti adds a personal note of considerable candor. He had the opportunity, years ago, to interview Neil Donald Walsch with the help of a friend who served as interpreter. The experience was, he reports, deeply disorienting. The man himself gave answers so banal, so intellectually limited, and so personally unimpressive that the interview was never published. The contrast between the extraordinary spiritual content of the books and the ordinariness of their author is not, in Franceschetti's view, a paradox or a scandal. It is an illustration of how Rosicrucian transmission works. The books are not the product of Walsh's conscious mind. They are the product of the most evolved part of himself speaking, what a psychologist might call his unconscious, and what Franceschetti calls an entity that forms part of Walsh himself. The central theological moment in Conversations with God crystallizes this point. Walsh asks God, "If God is inside us and must be found within us, then who am I speaking to, you or myself?" And God answers, "Both. I am an expression of you and of your unconscious." This is the nucleus, Franceschetti observes, not only of the Rosicrucian tradition, but of all authentic spiritual teaching. The divine is not wholly other, wholly exterior. It is the deepest and most real dimension of the self. The outer world is a reflection of the inner, and the separation between the human and the divine is ultimately an illusion of perception. The fourth great symbol produced by Milwaukee is Harley-Davidson. Founded in 1903 and still, more than a century later, the most recognizable motorcycle brand in the world. Franceschetti, who owned a Harley-Davidson for many years and describes it as still his favorite motorcycle, approaches it not as an industrial product, but as a cultural and esoteric symbol. The Harley-Davidson is the mechanical archetype of the American dream. When the frontier was closed, when the continent had been crossed, and there were no more physical horizons to ride toward, the motorcycle became the new horse of the pioneer. To ride a Harley is to place no walls between oneself and the world. It is to embody the self-sufficient individual who charts his own course, free from the constraints of mass society. It is a dream of freedom, and Franceschetti acknowledges it as such. He also notes its inherent contradiction. The Harley is simultaneously the symbol of the outlaw and the vehicle of choice for police departments across America. It carries within itself the duality of the American soul, deep respect for order alongside an equally deep love of liberty. From an industrial standpoint, Harley-Davidson embodies a specifically American form of resilience. It survived the Great Depression. It has survived every subsequent crisis. It remains, unlike virtually every European and Japanese competitor, in a position of symbolic and commercial strength. It is the company that refused to disappear, the small David that defeated the foreign Goliaths. And here the Rosicrucian connection becomes explicit through the name itself, Davidson, son of David. The Rosicrucians are also known, in certain traditions, as the lineage of David, the Davidic line. In biblical mythology, David is the small shepherd who defeats the giant Goliath. In the industrial mythology of America, Harley-Davidson is the David that has fought against the giants of foreign competition and defended American identity. Not only defended it, exported it. The Harley-Davidson is perhaps the single most successful vehicle for the global spread of American cultural identity. From an alchemical perspective, Franceschetti notes that Harley-Davidson motorcycles are predominantly black, and their riders, the bikers, with their Harley insignia and their leather, are dressed in black. Alchemically, this places the Harley firmly within the Nigredo, the black work, the first stage of the alchemical process. The dream of freedom and individual power is real, but it is not yet transformed. It belongs to the same dark stratum as the unconscious itself. Franceschetti brings the four elements together in a final synthesis. Milwaukee is the city of the unconscious, a place whose energies, recognized by the native peoples who gathered here for thousands of years, draw to the surface the deepest contents of the American psyche. Happy Days is the symbol of what the Masonic project of America wanted to create: a happy society, a meritocratic community, a world in which the good man is rewarded and every conflict finds its resolution. It is the dream that many people, even outside America, recognize as something they would want: a life of security, friendship, and quiet contentment. Jeffrey Dahmer is what lies beneath that dream. The darkness that accumulates when a civilization is built on violence, on the suppression of the sacred, and on the systematic destruction of those who were already in harmony with the land. The dream that excludes spirituality from its vision of happiness does not eliminate the spiritual. It drives it underground, into the unconscious, where it festers and eventually erupts in monstrous form. Dahmer is not an aberration of the American dream. He is its shadow, the inevitable product of an alchemical process that was begun but never completed. Harley-Davidson is the dream in motion, the American spirit expanding outward across the world, carrying with it both its light and its darkness. The Harley exports the ideal of freedom, but American freedom has always come bundled with its opposite: war, destabilization, puppet governments, and the violent imposition of a model that was itself born in violence. The Davidic lineage rides out into the world, but it is still in the black work. The transformation is not yet complete. Neil Donald Walsch is the figure who points beyond all of this. Born in Milwaukee, in the city of the unconscious, in the place where all these energies converge, he cannot remain there. The unconscious is the place of origin, but not of creation. To produce something purely and wholly luminous, he must move to a place that is explicitly and unambiguously Rosicrucian, to Ashland, to the city of Shakespeare, to the White Rose Cross. There, drawing on the deepest and most evolved part of himself, he channels a message that has reached millions of people across the world: that God is not outside us, that the divine is not other, that the separation between the human and the sacred is an illusion, and that the dream of a better life, a life of genuine happiness, is not a Masonic project or a television fantasy, but a real possibility, grounded not in material comfort alone, but in the awakening of the inner life. Milwaukee, Franceschetti concludes, is the place where America dreams, and where, in dreaming, it reveals everything it has not yet been able to face about itself. The unconscious does not sleep. It waits. See you in the next episode of America's Esoteric History, here on Compelling Topics.
I went to